In previous ages, now I'm not going to draw it way too far. Let's keep it to the 18th and 19th century. It was used also in previous centuries, but I'm going to talk about the 18th and 19th century. Before the steamship became the norm, you had sail ships. So travel throughout the world was slow. Overseas territories, whether it was in the British Empire or the Spanish Empire before it collapsed, or the French Empire, ships used to transfer official documents, reports from governors to their homeland, or legislation from the motherland to the quote-unquote colonies or overseas territories. And you also had businesses that were located, for example, in France, but they operated in, let's say, French Guiana. So the distance was long in time. Today, you can just send someone an email or you can call someone. You didn't have it back then. So what they did was, when a document arrived, when mail arrived, they would examine the document to see whether it was really from whom it claims to be. Let's say that you were an employee, or let's say you were a manager in Jamaica on behalf of a British firm that was registered in London. Let's say that your boss, who lived in London, enforced a new policy for the corporation. A ship arrived with mail for you, with instructions from your boss. Now you need to be sure that the document is really from your boss and not a forgery by scammers. So you are familiar with his handwriting. Or if it's a printing press they've used, you're familiar with his style. And in those times you had seals. They sealed documents. So what do? You hire an inspector with a magnifying glass and he would examine the document. He would examine the ink, at least the quality thereof. If the quality was too dry, then it was a very old document and not a recent one. There were ways to see whether the ink quality was decades old or just less than a year or two old. There were ways to see it. People specialize in examining those things. They would look at the seal. They would look at the small letters. If the document contains small letters, they would examine the document to be sure it was a legitimate, authentic document. Because anyone could write something, pretend being some mayor or some minister. So, in those times, you had to examine the documents. Magnifying glasses were common in doing this. They had no scanners, no infrared machinery, so they used what they had. And they were good at it. That's how many companies succeeded for decades, some even for more than a century. And some of those companies turned into modern day corporations that we see today. They knew what they were doing. Now, I've placed an image with a magnifying glass in the background of this video. And the magnifying glass is on an open book, and you can see a part of the text is magnified. It's highlighted. That's why you have a magnifying glass to magnify something so that you can take a closer look at it. I'm telling you all of this to reveal unto you that people in previous ages, they were not dumb. They may not have had the fastest technology like we have today, but they were smart. They were specialized in what they were doing, and they were good at it. You couldn't just arrive, for example, in New York, saying that you had a residence permit and that you had to withdraw money from the bank. You couldn't just come with a banknote stating you had the right to withdraw, let's say, £200 sterling. That is prior to the independence of the 13 colonies. You couldn't just do that. If you arrived at a bank in New York when it was still under British rule, at the bank they would come with the magnifying glasses and they would examine the document. They had their protocols agreed with London, how official documents were made. And if they noticed an anomaly in the document, you went to jail. That's how it went. That's how they screened people. Question: are you screening what you're receiving? And I'm not talking about teachings. I'm not talking about sermons. I'm talking about the content people bring to your life. Are you screening them? Look, when someone enters your life, this whole concept, your life, is itself a construct, but you get what I'm saying. When someone is around you regularly for a longer period of time, let me call it like that. That's what I mean with your life. When someone enters your life, what are they bringing to it? What are they bringing with them? Are they bringing curses with them? Are they bringing diseases? Are they bringing violence with them? Are they bringing contention? Are they bringing the demon spirits? What are they bringing with them? Too often, we don't check what people bring with them. And it's only when it's way too late that we realize that something is wrong. Think about the 18th century and to some part the early 19th century. If you had to board a ship, you were examined. If you had a record, probably the captain would say, I don't want you on my ship, especially if you had violence-related offenses. If you were on the run, let's say you had debt collectors after you, or you had people coming after you because you either robbed someone or you were just a target. If that was you, then maybe they would have told you, you better don't board a ship. If you were about to board a ship, whether it was as a sailor, or whether it was as an employee working for some maritime corporation, or whether it was as a migrant that you just wanted to move to another place, you were checked. Your health was checked, because you would have to spend weeks on board. And if you had health issues, they probably would say, okay, we can't bring you with us because it will be a liability onto us. If you had mental issues, they could also refuse you on the ship, because they would tell you, if we're out there and suddenly you freak out that we're on the middle of the sea or the middle of the ocean and we have someone with a mental issue, that's going to become dangerous. You have a temper issue, they could say to you, you're not coming on the ship. They had to be practical. Because remember, when you are in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and you still had, let's say, 10 days ahead of you before you arrived in North America, you couldn't afford that 10 days prior to your arrival, people died because someone lost it. Or that there's someone who's out there to get someone. Let's say you have someone that boards to North America, let's say to Florida, but he has a rival, an enemy that's with him, and that enemy takes it out on him on that ship. Now you have homicide on the ship. During those times, they examined whom they brought with them. You couldn't just board any ship. And by the way, you had to be careful also, because if you were on a ship and people turned on you, they could throw you overboard, you would die, and nobody would notice it. Such things also happened. So it was both ways. You couldn't just enter any ship just like that, and you had to be careful which ship you entered in, because you would be dependent for your life on them for at least 3 weeks if it was crossing an ocean. And you had to be prepared that if a storm arrived on your way to your destination, you had to endure the storm. So you also had to be psychologically prepared to endure storms. So, question to you. Are you examining or are you checking what folks bring with them? Or let's turn it around. Are you checking what you'll be involved with when you involve yourself with certain people? No, I'm not saying that you should develop a black and white thinking, that if you have expectations, people measure expectations, they don't exist for you. That's what worldly people do, and it's wrong. It's toxic, it's narcissistic, and leads to violence. It leads to fatal situations. What I'm telling you is examine what they carry with them. If it's someone that needs help, then they need help. But realize, as long as they need help and the help has not arrived, they can be a risk for you. If someone suffers from schizophrenia and he didn't receive his help yet, his treatment, I'm not saying he will turn on you and do anything crazy, but the risk is there, so you should be aware of it. So you keep your safe distance, not because you look down on him or her, but for practicality's sake. You're realistic. If someone has a disease, even the doctors and medical professionals put such an individual in a safe place so that nobody else is infected by the disease. And they realize that they're the ones who need to treat the patient, but they need to watch out, because if you're not careful, they'll be infected also. That's why they wear special suits when they're dealing with people that carry infectious diseases. Yes, they're not looking down on those people. They do it so that they can both help the patient as well as keep themselves safe, because if they are endangered, then there's no use for helping the patient. How can you help a patient if you are endangered also? It's not going to work. That's why in hospitals they have strict regulations, and they should have those. Why am I telling you all of this in this video? Are you using your spiritual magnifying glass? Are you checking what folks bring with them, or what folks carry with them? Or are you checking what you're getting yourself involved with? When the New Testament says test all things, it didn't say test all things of the scripture. It didn't say test all scripture. It didn't say test all sermons or test every church service. It said test all things. It didn't say doubt all things. It didn't say be suspicious of all things. It didn't say be paranoid about all things. It said test all things. So examine things. That's what you ought to do. A lot of folks don't want to do this. Unfortunately, there are also believers like this. That's why you fall prey to predators over and over again. And here's the thing. Those predators do use their spiritual magnifying glass. But they're not serving Christ. They're in the paranormal. But they use paranormal aid to examine situations. That's why those pagan scammers get away so often, because they know what to do. They know who is vulnerable and who is easier to scam and who isn't. They know that they need to act quickly to draw people in patterns. And they know that once an individual is in a pattern, they've won. They know what they're doing. My question to you is, do you know what you're doing? Are you in line with Christ? Are you Christ-centered? Are you wise as a serpent, innocent as a dove? Are you overcoming the wiles of the enemy? Are you walking by faith? Are you? That's something you need to answer. Agree with Christ and be at peace.